Wanted to introduce our new Director of DPW, Rosemarie Gaglione, and she's waving down the corner. Rosemarie, if you want to say anything, unmute and say hello. Rosemarie's been with us since March. She comes from Oxnard. Been really pleased to be working with her these last few months, and actually she's pretty up to speed on all our projects, especially this one. So Rosemarie, just a couple words.
Sure, and I'm very, very excited to be here in Marin. Happy to be here tonight. I know that staff has done a lot of work on this project along with all of you, and I'm looking forward to having staff get all of your input so we can come to a solution that will be acceptable to everyone and hopefully have the funds to fund that.
All right, thank you, Rosemarie. So I'm going to be handing this over to Philip Buckley, who is the project manager and a senior engineer with the county. He's going to do a presentation on the overall project and then hand over to, who's he going to hand over to? I'm not even sure. Our lighting team to go over the lighting piece of the project. And then we'll do Q&A, and we have plenty of time for the Q&A, and I think we'll focus first Q&A on the lights and then move on to the overall project. So, and I think we'll be fine. Hopefully we'll get to everybody's questions, and if we don't get to everyone's questions, you all can email me your questions and we'll get back to you via email after the meeting. So with that, Philip, I'm going to hand over to you, and you can share your screen, and thank you also for all the work you've done on this project over the many months.
Okay, thank you, Katie. As Katie said, I am just going to talk real briefly and just update you on the progress, and just talk a little bit about where we're at before we move into the lights. As she said, thank you for your patience with the noise, with the paving, with all the disruptions that this project has caused for many of you. We are getting very close to being done, so it's exciting in that regard, and I'm sure there's a sense of relief as well. Just to update on what's been completed, all of the pedestrian safety and accessibility improvements have been completed. This is the Ash Avenue Hawk signal here in this photograph. All the infrastructure for fiber optic communications and the signal interconnect is all in place. The intersections have been reconfigured and the improvements have been made at the intersections. At this intersection here, the pork chop islands have been removed. And just actually today, we had a number of complaints about this intersection and how it was changed from, with this middle lane, the configuration and kind of the timing, the phasing there. And we went back to our designers at La Cuesta, and they approved us making the change to kind of put the lane configuration with this middle lane being a combination through left turn lane. So we've re-implemented that today. And so, yeah, all the 8 signalized intersections, the pedestrian and safety improvements have been completed. We are still making a lot of changes with the timing and optimization. Just yesterday, Wolf Grade, there was some timing there. If you've driven along the corridor and you've come to a stop, and
Philip, can you unmute yourself, please? Sorry, I messed up.
Oh, I muted myself somehow.
No, I didn't. Go ahead. But you.
Okay. So we're still making timing and coordination improvements, and that's kind of going to be an ongoing process as we test the system. The team will be making changes there. So appreciate your patience with kind of really how long it's taken to get our coordination into the system. Okay. So with the rest of the ongoing work that we're working on, We're finishing up some water line at Alicio. I do want to just emphasize how important the work is that we have completed with the water line. Throughout the course of the project, we've encountered a number of times when the pipeline, which was 100 years old in Sir Francis Drake, has had leaks, and we've had emergency repairs with MMWD, and we're actually fixing some stuff. Some 70-year-old pipeline right now in Alicio. The good news is that the water line work and the night work looks to be completed at the end of next week. The nighttime grinding is ending this week. The major grinding operation for our paving is ending this week, with tonight being the last night of the work week. So that's also good news as far as the noise and all the equipment associated with that heavy grinding. We're working closer towards Highway 101 and the freeway, and there are going to be some closures tonight and next Wednesday for the on-ramps at the freeway. So you may be going to get on the freeway in the evening and trying to head north or south, and your route will be different, and it's definitely an inconvenience. So we appreciate your patience, but we're getting very close, and next week should be the end of the major paving operations, with a final lift going on next week. The fall after next week, there will be some manholes that will be raised, some minor work. The work will go quickly, but there will be some more night work after next week. But the major equipment and the major paving operations will be concluded at the end of next week. I did want to just talk a little bit there before we get into the lights, and I turn this over. There's been comments about why do we need more lights, and there's less people driving at night, and kind of like, why do we need more lighting in the corridor? And this is a photo in Green Beret. You can see that there's a shadowy dark area. It's dark between the intersections, and then at the intersections there's lighting. What we're looking at here is a photograph taken in February where this traffic signal pole, which was on this pork chop island, was hit at night, and that was in February. This photo was taken, and then about 3 weeks later a similar thing happened. The pole was hit again, and I just want to state that we do have incidents at night. We had someone hit the median on Tuesday night in Green Beret. Last week at Bon Air, we also had a hit and run where someone entered the cone zone driving way too fast. They left the path that they were supposed to be within the cones, and they entered the work area and nearly hit 2 of our workers. So we really just appreciate your patience with the detours, with the slowdowns, with the night work noise as we get to the end of this project. Just kind of as we wrap up, we'll be finishing out the majority of the paving next week, coming in with pavement striping, and then we're going to be talking about the street lighting tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff and Ashley and their team, and then excuse me, after street lighting we will be landscaping and taking care of the weeds, which have been a nuisance, and the landscaping is basically at this point the work is being delayed, not just because of the drought. We are delaying the major planting within the project because of the drought, but we are looking to do some irrigation work at the completion of the street lighting, and we need to make decisions about the street lighting, and we need to kind of get it finalized and implemented before we move ahead with the landscaping. One final topic is the traffic signal poles. Now what's pictured here are traffic signal poles, and these are different than what Jeff and Ashley are going to be talking about, which is the street light poles. these traffic signal poles were installed, and we got a lot of complaints and comments just about the size and the mass of them. And they're a lot bigger than what we're accustomed to seeing. And it really is the new standard to have these larger poles. The standards have been updated, and as the county, we're subject to using the latest design standards. And as a result, we have larger poles. So one of the questions has been, can we can we paint the poles? There are colored poles in the area that are green over on Bon Air at the new Bon Air Bridge and South Alicio there. And can we paint the poles and make them look better? So we're not looking at the metal. And so we've looked into that. One idea would be to just look at the pole replacement, and the costs for pole replacement. Each one of the poles is custom based on the number of fixtures it has, the mast arm lengths, and it took us 6 months to get the poles from when we ordered them in June and got them delivered finally onto Sir Francis Drake in December. So there's a great deal of expense to replace all the poles and have them all powder coated. So we don't see that as being a good option. The other option was looking at painting the existing poles. And what I have here over on the left is poles from neighboring communities. This is Petaluma, Novato, and Napa. And what happens when you paint a galvanized metal surface is the galvanizing process is made so that the poles don't rust and they don't, nothing kind of sticks to them, versus when we try to paint, or our experience and the contractors and the team members that we've spoken to say that painting existing galvanizing poles and trying to take that galvanizing off is a very difficult process. It doesn't tend to work well, tends to look really bad, as we see in these photographs from other communities. And so we're basically thinking that that is not a direction we want to head in. And the poles as they are really our best option going forward. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Jeff Rubendahl to talk about lighting. So I'll stop sharing my screen here.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks everyone for allowing us to come in front of you today. So we've been hard at work for the last few months working with Philip and his team to come up with some ideas and options to address some of the concerns that have been raised since the streetlight poles were installed and turned on. We're actually going to go through quite a bit of content, so we'll try to keep it comfortably paced and informative, but not dwell on it too much, so we have time for some discussion. We've kind of broken up. It's actually I'm going to turn it over to Ashley again to go through it to start it off, but we've kind of broken it up into two sections. The first section is going to be more of some basic lighting terminology, so that as we start talking about what we're doing and what we see as opportunities, we'll be able to give you a sense of what some of the lighting elements that we're looking to modify as part of these improvements. Then we're going to pivot to walk through the corridor from west to east and talk through kind of what some options we see to address the issues of overlighting, lighting into folks' properties, as well as just keeping the light where it needs to be for safety reasons. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ashley. But before I do, just a quick understanding. So Fair and Pierce, we're helping the county with this project. We're a transportation consulting firm that specializes in transportation projects that include elements of roadway safety lighting. And the project analyst, Ashley, is one of our visual communications experts here in the Bay Area. And I actually lead our engineering practice. So I'm also a San Rafael resident. I travel this corridor all the time. So I'm very, very familiar with kind of the before, middle, and hopefully the future of it. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Ashley.
Thanks, Jeff. And thank you everyone for spending some time with us tonight. First off, I just want to start off with why street lighting is important for the reasons listed here. Safety, personal security, economic driver, and aesthetics, creating a sense of space. So For all of these reasons, street lighting is extremely important, but I think the biggest reasons are personal safety and just general roadway safety as well. So with that in mind, I want to go through a couple of lighting basics, just explain a couple of terms to help you understand how we explain the proposed solutions. We'll be using a lot of these terms later when we share our solutions. So just want to give everyone an opportunity to see the different elements that go into lighting analysis. So the first terminology that I want to throw out is lumens, which is how bright a particular light is. The unit of measurement is foot candles, which, fun fact, it's actually measured with how much a single candle lights 1 square foot of surface area. Color temperature is essentially how cool or warm the light is going to look and feel. Distribution is how the light is cast, so essentially the shape of the light onto any surface. And light pollution or light trespass is essentially any light that is going outside of what we want to be lit, kind of light that goes beyond the necessary things being lit. Then we have some streetlight components. So what exactly is this luminaire that we're talking about? First, we have a pole, which is the long vertical metal piece. Then we have a mast arm that connects the vertical pole to the fixture. And the fixture is what actually emits the light. All of this sits on a foundation that essentially anchors the whole pole or the whole luminaire, and can range from 10 to 15 feet as an example. So again, I'm just breaking all of these things down because we'll be using a lot of these terms later, and just want everyone to have the same foundation. Mounting height, going a little bit deeper into the nuances of this luminaire. The mounting height determines like how tall the light is and where the light is casting. So lower mounting height is typically used for pedestrian areas such as sidewalks, plazas, parks. And a higher mounting height is typically used to light the roadway, to light the street itself and where vehicles are traveling. So keeping all of that in mind, another thing we look at, and another piece that we can control and change, is the mast arm length. Essentially, again, the piece of metal that is attached to the long pole and attaches the fixture. That's something that we can control and change. So for example, if we shorten a mast arm from 12 feet to 6 feet, that's 6 feet less of like metal up in the air. And keeping that in mind, the blue line that's shown on the screen is essentially understanding that where the light starts to be emitted from may be different from the height of the pole itself, kind of depending on the design. So these are all different things that we can take into consideration when we're looking and designing streetlights. So in order to analyze appropriate light levels, we isolate different zones. The first being the roadway, which has to be a certain brightness in order to allow moving vehicles to essentially see any conflicts. So we look at that in isolation. Then we look at sidewalks and paths separate from the roadway, and that needs to be lit enough for pedestrians to feel safe walking, but doesn't necessarily need to be as bright as the roadway. Spillover is then what we look at. It's the light trespass beyond the roadway and the sidewalk, and we try to reduce this as much as possible. And finally, we look at intersections separately, which typically needs to be 2 times as bright as adjacent roadways due to the conflicts that can be expected in this area, such as pedestrians crossing and cars turning. Next, just want to get into some metrics and just the engineering numbers kind of behind everything that we're looking at. This really guides our design and is considered best practice. So first, roadway classification. This is what is the function of the road, where does it go, how many vehicles use it on an average day. Sir Francis Drake is a major roadway because of the average daily traffic and because it connects through multiple neighborhoods. And while we recognize that traffic on Sir Francis Drake is lower at night, a multitude of conditions still determines the need for certain levels of light, such as overcast and rainy days that can make the road appear darker even during the middle of the day. So we also look at pedestrian conflict area, or essentially how many pedestrians can we be expecting on this road. And Sir Francis Drake is typically a low pedestrian zone. There's just not that many people walking around. Then we look at pavement classification, which is essentially the materials that the road is paved in, and takes into consideration any light that reflects off of a specific material. And then we look at uniformity, which is the distribution, how evenly distributed the light is along the roadway. We don't want spots that are too bright. We don't want spots that are too dark. So all of that said, these are all the different metrics that we take into consideration when designing best practices for street lighting. And with all of those components in mind, I will turn it over to Jeff to present our proposed solutions.
Thank you, Ashley. So that's the lighting 101, just to talk through some of the options and variables we looked at as we kind of looked through the corridor. So we basically looked at what the conditions were before the project and designed with part of the project and took a couple different perspectives on how to make some changes, understanding that some of the issues are related to the light trespass that Ashley described, the actual height of the poles themselves, and the aesthetics of them themselves. So what we're going to present here is some of the ideas that we've come up with. There's a couple iterations and other options and ideas and types of fixtures we looked at, but we're kind of whittled it down to ones that are both feasible to address the issues that we found on the corridor, but also that have enough flexibility so that it actually works throughout the whole corridor, where it's applicable and works with the actual context of the corridor itself. Next slide. So we can break our kind of potential strategies into potential solutions into two different types. There's the Cobrahead fixture replacement, which is what you see here, the ones that these are existing from before the project, where the project replaced just the fixture, which is just the little thing that emits the light at the top. And we actually looked at changing those fixtures again to distribute the light differently so that it actually doesn't cast as far back and towards the property lines, and it actually casts more longitudinally along the path of traffic. So in daytime, the changes wouldn't look anything differently, but the actual how the light is cast at night and how consistent it is or how uniform it is would. And what we found is by adjusting the fixtures, both the distribution and the brightness, we were able to actually, with the same placement of the existing luminaires from before, have a pretty considerable improvements to the issues of lighting of casting beyond, while still maintaining the acceptable range of a roadway of this character, while minimizing all of the things that have kind of caused some concerns. The next is looking at other options for different fixtures. This fixture that has a couple representative pictures here and some of the master versions of it is one of the luminaire fixtures that we found that had the best applicability for a corridor like this to both light the roadway at or about the same spacing. And what we found, the adjustments to the fixtures allow for uses based on a lot of the different elements of the corridor. So it has a lot of ways we can adjust it to make it work consistently throughout the areas where we're considering it. So here on the bottom is actually, if you would say that, just a representative image of the Cobraheads, the two mast arm Cobraheads that have been installed to these smaller poles that are about 8 to 10 feet shorter at a mounting height that's much more modest, much more reasonable, to still light the roadway to the level that we want and to minimize the spillover. So these are the ones we are investigating and found some ways and some locations where they might address some of that. Next slide. So this is just a quick overview. I'm not going to go through every number. We can go over it later if we want, but this is just a snapshot of what was there before the upgrade of the Drake, what was there then, and just to understand in an area by area way or in a corridor how the amount of streetlights and fixtures have changed, have been increased. We're going to walk through. I'll walk through these zones 1, 2, and 3 from west to east. We developed the zones sort of arbitrarily, but with the purpose of understanding the nature of the roadway, the nature of the existing lights from before the project, and just to have an understanding of breaking the larger corridor into sub areas. It's not intended to be it's more of just to kind of put them into categories where some conditions as it relates to lighting or the need for lighting changes. So this slide demonstrates where where our potential solutions have the most applicability. So starting in zone 1, where the Cobraheads were existing from before the project, there's actually quite a bit of improvement to the lighting consistency and brightness by just replacing those fixtures. So we don't have to rebuild new foundations for them, and actually just light the roadway better than before, or consistently, but better in the sense that it's more context sensitive, not brighter and better, but just more context sensitive. Zone 2, which is in front of the high school, the hospital, is kind of where we have a couple different options, because it's where there are existing poles that were old that remain, as well as some new poles. So we investigated both options of fixture replacement and decorative poles. We'll show you a little bit about what that could look like, and we're investigating what the results are. The good news is but we were able to determine in both scenarios, whether it's the Cobrahead replacement, fixture replacement only, or decorative poles, they have the same lighting result. So the decorative poles, a bunch of new poles, does cost more, but the actual results of lighting the roadway and minimizing the light trespass, we were able to find a way for both of those options to have a pretty good improvement. Zone 3 is kind of where the roadway is a little more curvy. The existing poles are actually on the sides of the street, so there's only a single mast arm. And because of that, the decorative fixtures don't really cast light effectively all the way to the other side of the road where it needs to be lit. So the decorative poles didn't seem as feasible of an option there. But then east of El Portal, where most or if not all of the lights are new, we looked at an option to replace those with something more decorative. So I'll walk through and kind of show you what that actually is going to look like. So first the zone 1, where this is a very simplistic rendering of really the difference is just how the light is cast. It's not going to cast as far wide into folks' backyards or beyond the property lines, but it's really going to be as contained as we can make it into light where we want to light it. Next slide. So this, I'm going to spend a little time on this just because we have a lot of these images. This is a 3D rendering model of the corridor in zone 1 that the software we use we can create this in there. It isn't true to form. I mean, it doesn't show windows, it doesn't show front doors, but it's an approximation of the nature of it. There is a pretty big difference between the lighting shown on the existing, which is what's installed today, and proposed, which is the Cobrahead fixture replacement. It's a little nuanced if you look at it in black and white and grayscale. So if you go to the next slide, by adding in a different color spectrum, we can kind of really see how that fixture placement would improve the conditions. So I'm going to spend a little time. It's a little bit of a magic eye poster, but work with me here. It actually does make sense. The brightness or the dark red, those are the hot spots. That's where really bright pavement is going to be. The existing condition with the lights on are really focused in the median. They're really pointing down and kind of overlapping with one another. That's kind of makes for that extra brightness. So the uniformity is lacking. In the existing, there's also quite a bit of cyan color outside of the roadway. Cyan is light trespass for the most part. So if you compare the amount of cyan on the left and the right, there's actually quite a bit less of the cyan on the right. You kind of see the vertical faces of the buildings where there's some greens on the existing, and those greens are taken to a minimum on the right. We got some numbers to show you what that actually means as well. Another rendering of the same one showing that in the existing condition, the lights are really casting up to the face of the buildings, and by changing the fixtures out, we really lessen the brightness and the trespass in that result. This is one more just bird's eye view of the same idea. Kind of the one that jumps out at me is the amount of cyan on the left. You can really see the amount of light that gets over the fences, whereas on the right, it's brought down to a minimum. You can see a little less of the edges of buildings and whatnot. It's not. So zone 2 is where things get a little bit different. We looked at both options that change the fixture only, but also replace all the poles out there with decorative ones. So as I was saying before, the results of whether it's a fixture replacement or decorative in terms of the lighting looks very similar. The results are very similar. So we didn't do a visualization of the decorative ones for the proposed, but what we were able to do is really minimize the bright spots with a fixture replacement option. What you see on this one is an approximation of the fence line in part of the corridor. And what you can see is the fence is still going to have light cast on it, but the beyond the fence and the buildings themselves have a much lower amount of spillover or light trespass by focusing the poles down and shortening the mast arms a few feet. Another bird's eye view that shows that same sort of thing. Less light on the building. So what does that mean? So if we put in decorative poles, they're going to be shorter. The mast arms would be about 8 feet, whereas the ones that are out there today are 12 feet. So that's a 60%-ish reduction in the mast arm length. They're also going to be 8 or so feet shorter. By doing that, in order to still maintain consistent uniform lighting along the corridor, the spacing of those decorative poles would need to be closer spaced than what's out there, the Cobraheads. So one of the drawbacks of the decorative poles is that there would be a total number of or more lights as decorative, but they're much shorter and less obtrusive above. So for example, on this corridor, because the spacing would change with the decorative, next slide, it would not actually be in that location. It would move 25 to 50 feet depending on the corridor, but it would be a much shorter pole, much more consistent with kind of the tree in this condition, like more like where the tree line is as well. Next page. So zone 3 is where it's kind of a little more of the curvier area where we have the luminaires on the side. Show you what the optics would look. We were able to reduce those bright spots quite considerably while still maintaining kind of a consistent amount of lighting to light the roadway through that more curvy segment of the street. La Cuesta and Alicio is kind of the zone 4 is where it's where the long row of new Cobraheads were installed. What we were able to do, one of the ways we came to this design aesthetic for a decorative, and you go to the next page, is that the mounting height and the amount of the length of the mast arm was determined so that we can actually reuse a lot of the foundations that have already been installed. We didn't really talk about it earlier, but a lighting system has a whole bunch of underground conduits or pipes and wires. All of that is intended to be reused fully as part of any lighting changes we do. The foundations, if we do start moving changing pole spacing, foundations can't be moved. They're big pieces of concrete. They're going to have to be demolished. But in this condition or in this configuration, we actually were able to reuse about half of them. So what you can see is the ending result from a lighting standpoint is the bright spots are nearly eliminated. Consistency wise, they maintained. And to call your attention to there's like a green line that's kind of on the left that kind of goes into the backyards on the left. That's a contour line of brightness to demonstrate the relative amount of light trespass that goes over those fence lines. If you go to the right, there's still some that goes over the fence line, but most of them are, at least on this view, they don't as impact the adjacent houses as much. So it's a marked decrease in the amount of light trespass in this corridor as well. So looking at kind of, this is what it looks like today. We all know what that looks like, with a decorative scheme with slightly different spacing, where we're changing every other pole. We'd be much lower, and the spacing would be about 100 feet instead of 150 feet. And we would have more poles, but not too many more. Maybe 3 or 4 in this zone, which we have the numbers here that we can go as well. And one thing I'll note while we're looking at this one is when we were during one of our investigations pretty early on, we did some visual view sheds of the actual parking lot lights that are in the Bon Air Center. Those lights are about the same height as the Cobraheads that are installed today. So just if you're standing on the back of the sidewalk and looking towards Mount Tam, or just looking towards those lights, these lights are much less towering over that line of sight to the light poles that are actually in the parking lot. So that was one of the elements we also took into consideration as well. Next slide. So a lot of information kind of thrown it at you, and trying to keep this going so that we have time to chat. But we saw the reduction in brightness and trespass, but we actually have a way to quantify that. I mean, each zone had a pretty sizable reduction in light trespass into adjacent houses and properties. We also showed here how many total poles there are. For example, in zone 4, where we're replacing the 2 mast arm Cobraheads with decorative ones, there's 20. There would be proposed. There's currently 15. With a decorative scheme, we would need 6 additional, so 21 total poles because of the spacing decrease. Whereas a zone 2 with the decorative one is only 8 new poles. So it's about a 30% increase in number of poles, but again, much lower, less obtrusive to that. And this is also the number down in zone 2 between the Cobrahead fixture replacement option and the decorative pole option. Both of them had the same reduction in spillover to the adjacent properties, 35%. So with that, that's the analysis we've done today. We feel is addressing some of the concerns that have been raised. Wanted to go through what the anticipated next steps are. And we can talk through this as well, but just to understand that what we hear tonight and what we have been hearing, we're going to incorporate into whatever we do moving forward. We're going to refine the analysis and work with Philip and his team to really show what the models will tell us things would look like, and then we'll develop some cost estimates so we know what the level of investment is needed to execute the changes to the system or to the corridor. And then we'll come back to the CAC and show them kind of how things have changed, maybe give them some numbers in terms of total numbers of new lights and the costs, et cetera. Then we'll work towards finalizing the preferred alternative so that we can actually get put together some construction documents so contractors can be solicited for bids to do this work. And then just like any other project, there's a formal presentation of the design to the Board of Supervisors that will approve the design so that we can go to construction. I'm sure there's elements of that we can as well. We can discuss as well. So with that, I will kick it back to who's moderating the next.
Going to be Eric Miller. Is that who's next?
Yes.
All right. Eric, are you there?
It looks like you have to make him a co-host or something. He's not
Oh.
able to unmute himself.
All right, let me find him. Meanwhile, Jeff, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, and Ashley as well.
Eric should be able to unmute himself now.
Hello.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Miller. I also work with Public Works in the engineering group. I just wanted to put a button on everything. First of all, thank you, Philip and Jeff and Ashley, for the presentation. I wanted to just kind of touch on next steps from the county's perspective. I know Jeff just walked through the steps, but a lot of this is really going to hinge on the budget, and that's going to drive a lot of the decisions we make moving forward, as well as the input that we get from you all here this evening. The project itself, as Philip mentioned at the beginning, is coming to a close. And so the budget conversation for that project is really going to be clearer in the coming weeks. And that's going to give the team an opportunity to see kind of what funding might be left over to fund this sort of work. We're then going to get together with the folks at Public Works that manage the Marin County Street Lighting Fund to see what we can do in the way of funding whatever preferred alternative comes out of this effort. From there, like Jeff said, we're going to get back with the CAC, the Community Advisory Committee. We'll work with them to finalize any outstanding decisions, and then we'll bring it to the Board of Supervisors for approval. We made the decision to rebid this work, and one of the benefits of doing that, we're going to pull it out of the existing contract. And we're going to we put it out for public bid, and that lets us get competitive bids, and it's going to give us the lowest price possible for these changes. And so that's probably in the best interest of this, is for us to put it out to competitive bid. Once it's awarded to someone, there is a lead time for this stuff. These, like Philip mentioned, these poles are all custom, and so there's going to be a waiting period at that point. And so we're really hoping we can get the street lights swapped out this fall, but there is a possibility that it might be in early 2022 that will finalize this. So I just wanted to let you know that there are some things that are out of our control with the lead time for some of these streetlights, but we're trying our hardest to get it done as quickly as possible. So with that, I appreciate you all being here tonight, and staff's available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Eric. I have one question in terms of the timing going forward, and when is there any differentiation between the work that would involve just replacing fixtures versus changing out whole poles? Is there the potential for some phasing of how this gets executed?
Absolutely, yeah. So the fixtures themselves are standard; those aren't custom. And so for the areas where we ultimately decide to swap out the fixtures rather than replace the poles in their entirety, that work can be done ahead of time. And so we'll explore all opportunities to get the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, done as quickly as possible.
Thank you. All right, so there's already some hands up, and I'll just call in the order that people have put their hands up, shows on my screen. If you have a question, to hopefully not repeat a question that's already been asked, but inviting everyone to, if you've got a question, please don't hesitate to ask. So, and then staff, I'll just look to you to know who would be best to answer whatever question comes up, okay? I can try to direct, but I have a feeling you'll know without me doing any direction.
And Katie, people can unmute themselves now. So when you call on them, you don't have to do that. They can do that.
Okay, well, when they can unmute themselves when I call on them.
Yes.
And, and we'd like to prioritize the questions regarding the lights.
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to start off with lighting. Pretty much want to really just drill down on the lighting and get the feedback and the questions regarding the lighting first, and then we'll go to the overall project. So Bettina, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate being heard, and I appreciate the time spent presenting this. At the beginning of the presentation, I believe they spoke about and showed lights that had been toppled over, for lack of a better term, and attributed those to DUIs and recklessness. And what's really concerning to me is that there's no rational basis or nexus necessarily, unless you can show me police reports or otherwise, or forensics or what have you, to show that lights are going to prevent drunk people driving recklessly or drunk. There was no evidence that was presented that demonstrates that these cars toppled over these light fixtures because there was insufficient lighting. So I don't see the nexus between that, and clearly that just feels like a very arbitrary, connection or nexus to justify what feels like already an abundance of lighting. the standards that are articulated globally and generally say that the lighting should be about 2.5 to 3 times the height, you know, and taking into account the traffic, the surroundings, and the width of the road. You know, you classify this street as major. Well, then what does 101 classify as? Like gargantuan? It's just, the logic there is really not adding up. And the lighting that is being proposed is for street lights that are traveled in potentially in darkness. Well, half the year, because we live in Northern California, it is light until 8 o'clock at night. The other half of the year, it gets dark around 5. The major amount of traffic, and by the way, I live right behind the park between Alicio and La Cuesta, and believe me, I see every car that goes by every minute of the day because of all of the plants that have been removed and an insufficiently heighted sized fence. The traffic slows down by 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. So I don't know when you're planning to illuminate for traffic that isn't there effectively. And to take away the height but add in numbers doesn't seem to resolve the problem. It just seems to exacerbate it. I don't feel that anybody's being heard, and I don't see the rational basis for adding more lights when there doesn't seem to be a nexus.
Okay, Bettina. So you are being heard, and you have been heard, and I think that we need to have lighting on this corridor, and it was clear during the whole design process. It was clear from comments by residents and folks traveling on the road. Yes, and I was at all the workshops moving into. So I'm sure there's disagreement on how much lighting or if there's lighting that's needed, but we actually, the county, we need to put lighting in the corridor. So right now we're trying to figure out what are the improvements we can make to what was put in there to make it, to reduce the light spillover, the light pollution, to make the system more aesthetically pleasing generally to the community, but to achieve the goals around illuminating the roadway and the pedestrian, the sidewalks and the multi-use paths. So I understand that not everybody is going to be happy with the result, but we're going to do that. We're doing the best we can. So
with all due respect, I appreciate that.
Bettina, there's so many people with their hands up. So I'd really like to get questions asked, but hang in there and we can get to the end for more comments as well. But let's also get the questions asked and answered. Okay. So with that, I'll go to Helena, and you can unmute yourself, Helena.
Hi, thank you. So my question, I also live with my backyard on Sir Francis Drake. I guess my question would be, is there any evidence that the light from Bon Air already helps with the safety of the street? Could that be addressed at all? And is there any sense that maybe the traffic is worse on weekdays versus weekends? Like, for example, could the lights not be on the weekends and only on the weekdays? Like, could there be some variation with the lights in terms of traffic patterns? And then my final question would be, will there be any changes to property taxes? We moved here just less than 3 years ago from the city. We lived on the Great Highway, and we were used to being on a major roadway with lights. And we were a little bit hesitant to buy a home on Sir Francis Drake, but we thought it was worth it. And I would say that if we had looked at this house with the lights as they were, I don't think we would have ever purchased the house, to be really honest with you. And I think it definitely decreases the value of the property. I think the value of the property is already affected by the noise and stuff, and I think the lights do decrease it. So will there be any changes to the property taxes? Those would be my questions. Thank you.
So I'm going to hand it over, I think, to Philip to answer the questions around the parking lot lighting and the timing of the system during the day, week. But with regards to property tax, that's based through the assessment of the assessor recorder's office, and it's really based on time of sale and projects that happen, whether it's lighting on the street or a hospital improvement or a new school next door. change the your property tax assessment. That would change when the house changes hands and there's a new sale price. So Philip, can you help with the other?
Yeah, I'll actually pass it to Jeff and Ashley. We are listening. We are focused with this whole effort on the disbursement of light in the backyard. So Jeff, can you talk more about the Bon Air
Yeah.
Center?
Yeah, I mean, this goes with the whole corridor. So as part of the developing the model to evaluate what these different changes would do, we did light readings all along the corridor, including Bon Air, to look at what the ambient light does. And there are some areas right next to them that it is measurable. Other areas where it is, and the amount of light that, at least in the Bon Air's case, that it lights on the roadway is really limited to the sidewalk, the southern sidewalk. You can see light from the lights themselves, but along the roadway it's actually pretty low. It's not zero, and we took that into account when we were able to adjust brightness levels of any new fixtures throughout the corridor based on those kind of baseline light readings.
And then the timing of when the lights go on or off by day or by season, how does that work? And is there any discretion or ability to manipulate that?
The most common engineering way to lights to turn on is what's called a photocell. Just like when it's dark enough, the light will not see enough ambient light and turn on. There is technology to adjust the brightness based on how much ambient light there is. One of the last projects we've done actually had the tunnel underpass in Donahue over in Marin City, where that had that technology. It's possible, but I would have to investigate how you would actually measure that, because if I have secondary concerns as to changing it without having some sort of defined reasoning and for doing that, whether it's the ambient light or the season itself or the number of vehicles. Maybe I'm thinking of just like not worst case scenario, but a hypothetical situation where if there's no cars, but then there's one and you literally see all the lights turning on and then they turn back off. That spotlighting that would probably be also distracting and so I'd have to think about that a little bit, but I think the technology does exist. I'm not sure if it's applicable for a corridor like this though.
I'd like to just add on real quick, if you will. The project goals are for safety on the corridor and not necessarily safety on the corridor during the week. It's safety when there's not enough sunlight and the streetlights are activated. And so even if there's technology, I'm not sure we would be investigating having them turned off during the weekends.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. Noreen, you can unmute yourself. Good evening.
Hi, thank you. I have just two things. I consider our road to Francis Drake very similar to I think it's called Tamalpais Road, which is where you get off to go to the town center. And they have these lower lights and it's all lit up. Have you compared Sir Francis Drake to that road? Because I have a feeling the traffic wise is about the same. There's more houses on that street, I agree. But I think that overlighting this corridor it's just ruining the feeling of the neighborhood. And so I would ask that you would look at the Tamalpais Road and look at their lights and how that is lit up, because I'm assuming they went through the same process and their lights met the same needs that Sir Francis Drake would meet. I mean, I've gone on 101 just from my house in Greenbrae to San Rafael, and there are no street lights on the freeway. So I don't think we need to light up Sir Francis Drake like it is the freeway. That's all. I just wanted to know if you could compare the two roads. Thank you.
Philip?
Yes, I will say that there are 46,000 cars a day in Greenbrae, and it's changed a lot over the years. I'm sure it's got to be one of the oldest roads in Marin, and it's a major gateway to all of West Marin, to the communities, as you know, of Ross, San Anselmo, Fairfax, and all of West Marin. So comparing the numbers of traffic volumes, we could certainly provide that to you. I don't think it's comparable in that sense. I think the speeds that vehicles are traveling are also very different. But yeah, no, we could put some more analysis on that as a comparison for sure.
And then also, I don't remember when Tamalpais was last, they did any major work on it or changes with the lighting, but as the traffic signal poles demonstrate, the codes and the standards change over time. And so that's also, and best practices change over time. So that may be one of the things to be able to look at too with Tamalpais in terms of the difference of how that lighting was treated. Let's see, Bruce is next. Bruce, you can unmute. Good evening.
Hi, thank you, Supervisor Rice. Yeah, I'm going to echo comments effectively that others have said about the potential overlighting of the corridor and think about it from slightly different, which is we all know that the new lights don't work and need to be fixed. But let's go back to where we were. I live near I think it's stretch 4 Bon Air area. And I believe there were something like 3 lights that were up along in that stretch that went to something like 17 and now are being proposed to go to something in the low 20s. And while I understand there might be a need for more lighting, to go from 3, which I assume were pretty inefficient lights or whatever, to more than 20, almost an order of magnitude of more lights. And even sorry for my dogs in the background, by the way. And even looking at the light pattern that was illustrated, it's basically a nonstop channel of light all the way through the area. And I really question whether that's necessary, given that when there were only 3 inefficient lights, we didn't seem to have a particular problem with safety or an exorbitant number of accidents or otherwise. So I would really ask the experts and otherwise to look and not see what is necessarily best practice, because we know that all defaults to overbuilding and otherwise. But what do we really need? Not what could we get, or not what would necessarily be best practice, but what do we need that is sufficient for safety, but also preserves the character of the neighborhood, knowing that the base case was dramatically lower than what is proposed and seemed to be acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Dan K.
Yeah, hey guys, Dan Carner. I no longer live on the street, but I lived on Acacia Avenue off of Rosebank up until a couple of years ago. A couple of things. One is that I just wanted to reach out to the county and say thank you very much for hearing us. I think that the idea of a notice of exemption when you change the number of existing poles from 36 to 83 and the number of existing fixtures from 50 to 121 is a bit of a stretch, and that's from someone who used to work in environmental consulting. Nevertheless, all I'm saying is we have to deal with what we have now rather than try to reinvent history. Therefore, I just hope that budgetary concerns take into account the fact that what we are dealing with here is in large part a consequence of the county choosing to file a notice of exemption rather than actually performing a full EIR study of the lighting situation. That's just a comment to be noted. Secondly, I do want to ask if it's possible for the lighting contractors to basically put up or create a map for us which shows along the entire corridor what their proposed solution identifies as the average illuminance that's going to exist along the corridor. We're shooting for the target of 70 foot or 0.9 foot candles along that, whereas we ended up with, in some cases, almost a factor of 3 times that. And for the purpose of trying to ease the concern of the people who live directly along the corridor, I think it's fair for them to be able to actually see what those numbers are going to be for each of their addresses, and potentially to see if there's a solution which can be, implemented to address their particular concerns. That's just sort of a hopefully a suggestion that might be able to help everybody sort of come to some agreement about how to move forward. But thank you very much for hearing it. I love the new lighting, the dangling ones versus the freeway looking ones. I think that's also much more in character with with the Greenbrae Kentfield neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. And I'm hoping our technical people got that question down and in terms of the mapping it so we can share a response through the regular website, and all your emails of course are collected on there, but hopefully you're all registered and getting notifications from the the Drake website. Okay, next, let's see. Terry Birka.
Hello, am I on?
Yes.
Hello, thanks for hearing us out. I do live in Greenbrae, but not along the corridor. And I've made the same observations as everyone else. It seems that presently that there's so much overflow that we should be at a minimum reducing every other light. I like that you've reduced the glare zone, but you're counting on the poles to accomplish lighting the roadway plus the sidewalks. Instead of spending money for additional poles, has an option or a solution been explored with lighting the sidewalks at a lower profile? I mean, you could even explore solar lighted fixtures, you know, much lower profile along the sidewalks, so that you could even look at reducing the light levels even further along the Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. I mean, don't we have lights on our cars? I don't understand that you're increasing the coverage so you've got 100% lighting along the road instead of like before you had pockets, I guess. And it's hard to wrap my head around the increased lighting. The example of Tamalpais Boulevard is a good one. And quite frankly, when I drove along Sir Francis Drake, I felt like I was approaching an airport or something where, you know, it had to be illuminated at the level it was. I mean, anyway, I just would hope that all options have been explored, that maybe you separate out the sidewalk lighting separately. So you put the money into lighting that and not counting on these center lights to have the lights be directed enough to cover all areas of the roadway. That's.
Yeah, Terry, thank you. And actually, Philip or Jeff, I believe you did look into some potentially doing separate lighting for the pedestrian pathways, if I recall.
We've discussed it. We didn't analyze it. The couple of the reasons for not doing that is lighting the sidewalk would make the poles from people's backyards look taller than what's out there today. Because those, even a 8-foot tall pedestrian post, like a head that you would see on the street, would be so much closer. Maybe in your view, should even worse.
Wait, excuse me. I don't understand. I mean, if you leave the poles the way they are, you don't have to add additional poles to spread the light further to make sure it gets to the sidewalk. You have something that check the survey for people walking on the sidewalks, and I can guarantee you nobody's walking at night.
The lights were not analyzed to light the sidewalks. They're lighting the roadway and the sidewalk. Putting another pole or a different pole or only a pole on the sidewalk, if it is also intended to light the roadway, it's going to be a tall one. If it's just lighting the sidewalk, then it's going to still need to be above a certain point out of the sidewalk. So it's going to be, at least in the Bon Air scenario, it would have to be in the area outside of the sidewalk, so it's not further impeding the pedestrian path of travel, but it would have to be tall enough to actually light something rather than being too low. So.
Terry, we're gonna that definitely your comment registered and thinking about potentially.
He misunderstood.
Terry, if I could just speak for a second too, Terry.
Yes.
We're really constrained along the sidewalk on the north side of Sir Francis Drake with the path that we have there now. The last time this project was undergone with a major paving on Sir Francis Drake was 95, 96. At that time, it was also an undergrounding project where there were, if you remember, if you've lived on Sir Francis Drake that long, there were joint power and telecommunications poles that were above ground in the backyards or along the fence line, and those were all underground and they're all underneath the sidewalk now. We just went through a lot of expense to try to make the sidewalk wider to still preserve what we could of the vegetation. The CSA 16 wants to come in and help reestablish the vegetation along the fences, and we've left tree pockets. So that's a priority for them. But we're really constrained with this amount of space we have there to do a smaller bollard light or something and still keep the path open for pedestrians.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you. And
Thank you.
I really appreciate the comment and trying to get creative about working this issue. Okay, so our next up is Mohsen. Good evening, Mohsen.
Yes, thank you. First, I wish to thank all the frontline staff and workers who worked on this project during such a hard time. And especially Mr. Buckley has been very responsive and cooperative in addressing. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you fine. Could everyone else please mute your mics, and we can hear Mr. Tavakolian. I didn't say that correctly.
It's Tavakolian. It's the way it is written. Thank you. Anyway, before I get to the lighting, I just want to bring an issue that is basically has been left out in my conversation with the county staff. The area under the pedestrian bridge needs landscaping. That is the area that kids walk every day going to school, and it has become a trash area. So that area needs to be landscaped, and that should be included in this project. I try to take care of that. I live on that corner. I try to take care of it as much as I can, but I have a limited budget, and therefore I did my best to keep part of it very nice, but the other part, which is under the bridge and all that area surrounding it, is not my land, and it's property that belongs to the county. So for that. I also agree with a lot of comments made about the excessive number of lightings that have been placed, which, there is nothing to add to that. However, since I live on the corner of Wolfgrade and Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, if you come to this location at night, it is like a football field lighted at night. I mean, it is just too many lights in this corner. And this is really annoying to people who live around here. All my neighbors are basically complaining about these lights. One thing that probably most of you don't realize is this, is about construction of this roadway. From Manor Drive, which is the next block west of Wolfgrade, from Manor Drive until College Avenue, as far as College Avenue, almost all the houses are only about 10 feet setback from the road. Whereas houses after Manor Drive, all the way to the freeway, they are like 30, 40, 50, 100 feet setback. So these lights are shining in our houses in this section, which I think it is zone 2. It's just right into our bedrooms. Not in our yards. It's bedrooms, my living room, my dining room, my bedrooms, they're all lit up at night.
Right.
So to me, this is an area that needs to be especially studied, that these houses are different from the ones back there. And therefore the lighting here should be, more especially designed, I believe. I don't know how they're gonna do that, but we need help. This is not right, that I have to cover all my windows at night because of these lights.
Mohsen, thank you. And I'm wondering if Philip or someone can speak to how the intersection.
Can I just add one more short?
Sure.
Why don't we use lampposts on the pedestrian bridge instead of using the street lighting to light the pedestrian bridge?
Okay.
Shorter lampposts.
Philip's going to answer your question.
Yes, we are trying to look at the whole corridor with this team comprehensively. And then as we do that, and we're still getting complaints, particularly at the intersections, There are areas at the intersections where we can use back shields and other tools. There's some shields at College that you'll see at the intersection there that are existing, that we can begin to address and implement concerns specifically to the intersections and the folks that live on those corners.
Philip, so for Mohsen, and I know there's others who have commented over the course of the last few months that are in those intersection areas, and we were going to be the team was going to be working with those individual property owners, or as you started to address these fixtures. And I'm not sure where you are in that process, but I know that you have people's names and contact information, but you might just want to speak to that.
Yeah, we know we've definitely collected the complaints. We know where there's some areas that need to be addressed, and our priority has been giving Fair and Pierce a fair shot at looking at the whole corridor, modeling it as it is, and then looking at solutions. And we would like to move forward with changes, and we would also like public support, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about tonight.
And then working on those individual light fixtures at the intersections as sort of a different segment of this response. So I think we'll leave it there for now. So Kevin Murphy, you're up next, and it's very nice to see you. It's been a long time.
It has. I've been a busy guy in other departments and other places. Thanks for taking these calls. I think you guys are doing a pretty good job of handling all of our comments and questions. I can't decide whether I'm going to ask a question or make a comment first. I'm going to go in with the questions. Question is, what is the color temperature of the existing lights versus what is the color temperature of the new lights? Second question is, what's the current lumen output on the ground of the existing versus the proposed lights? And third, if you can fathom this, what is the time it takes for the driver's eye to adjust to go from going through a dark area unlit or marginally lit into a bright area and then out again into a dark area? How long does it take for the driver's eye to adjust to that so that she can see what they need to see as they drive? Then those are the questions. A quick comment. Okay, I relit a condo development with changing from metal vapor lights to LED lights. Some of them were on the roadsides. All of them, I lowered the height, but there were condos right next to the light, and I back shielded those and cut out light pollution, light trespass completely. The owners in those condos, ground level and second and third story level, absolutely thrilled. The light was right next to their place, but they couldn't see any illumination. So that really works to be able to shield the light, focus it on where it's needed, and block it where it's unwanted.
Appreciate
That's
the
enough.
comment. And
You
then
get the idea.
would Jeff be the right person to answer the questions regarding the color temp and the lumens? Or you, Philip, whoever.
Yeah, Jeff, and also I would like to speak too. I would like to have Jeff or Ashley speak a little bit about the consistency of light throughout the corridor, and how Kevin mentioned going from a dark area to a light area, and your eyes to adjust to that. It's something that we've been talking about as a team, and that was kind of the point of me showing that photograph where the accident was, is that's exactly what's happening. You're going from shadow to a bright area. There was another gentleman, Bruce, that was talking like out of the box. How could we just add lights? You know, not think of a standard, but think of where we are now and how could we kind of just improve it. And where that breaks down and is difficult for us is that we don't have consistent lighting throughout the corridor, and your eyes are playing tricks on you with the shadows, and that is not good for safety and for night driving. So I'll stop there.
So
Jeff?
I'll try to tackle those relatively quickly. So the color temperature of the lights that were installed were close to the lowest, or the orangest that roadway lights should be for the industry best practices. There's one that we modeled the same, just in case we were only modifying a portion of the entire corridor. we didn't want to have an oranger light here and a less orange light here. But there are some options to make it slightly less white, a little bit closer to the orange, more like a living room internal light, orangey hue. That's a change. That's not going to really change the brightness. It's just going to change the color of the light itself.
By the numbers, that would be about 2,700 degrees Kelvin.
Yeah, yeah, right. Because I think
3,000 or higher.
Well, 3,000 is what's out there now. 2,700 is pretty much the low of range of what a roadway should be per the standards. The lumen output, so everything that we showed you during this that shows all the renderings, that is a rendering of a very detailed analysis where there's points every 10 feet along the entire corridor that have a data point. So to your point about the lumens and someone else about what's outside of my house, all that stuff, we have a model that has modeled that. Again, it is modeling it based on baseline readings that we've done, and everything we've done is a change to what most of you have had experienced when it was turned on. So it is an improvement upon the stuff we're talking about. And to your point about the dark to light to dark, that's actually one of the elements of lighting design, that the reason for consistent and uniform lighting is specifically that, is to counter any dark to light optics. There are some equations and some technical stuff that I could look up and quote, but that's one of the reasons for a modest level of consistent light being the appropriate solution in many cases. Wasn't your question, but an earlier question, I want to speak to it really quick about highway lighting. For somebody asked about, this is a major street, then what is 101 as a highway? We showed a table. There is freeway lighting, and then there's freeway and freeway, and the reason why one sees fewer lights on a freeway is because in between ramp and ramp, you have no one coming into and out of. You don't have intersections. You just have ramp. If you look at the ramp interchanges themselves, you'll see one very big light, because that's their conflict area, and everyone's going so fast, it needs to light that area. So the way lighting fundamentals are applied to freeways is very different than corridors, major corridors and such. And just, I think I talked about the uniformity. Was it all of your questions?
Yeah, thank
Kevin?
you.
Sorry.
Jeff or Kevin, I think you got your questions answered. Yes.
Pretty close. I wanted to know what the lumens were, because it's relative to what we see today versus what we saw in those cases where there's not been a change. What we will see, excuse me, I'm a rephrase. I think you get the idea. What was delivered in the previous lighting scheme versus what is being delivered in the newer lighting scheme. How many lumens will be on the ground? The real big deal that I noticed when I relit the condo development is that people were objecting at first to how bright they were, because they could see full color spectrum where they couldn't before.
Yeah.
After a couple of weeks, all those who were unhappy about it decided it was really great. They could see what they were wearing and see what others were wearing. It made it really easy to identify the surroundings and the environment, and it made them feel safe. That's my story.
Thank you. All right, let's see. A's iPad is next.
Hi, Katie. Thank you very much for hosting this. So my first question is, are there any statistics that demonstrate that nighttime vehicle accidents are related to lighting as opposed to weather or human error, such as being tired or under the influence? And also, I would agree with almost all the other comments that have been made so far. I will say that where I live, I don't need to turn any lights on in the house. And just from these new lights outside, I can see everything in the house. I could cook a meal if I wanted to with the lights off in my kitchen, just from the lighting that is coming through the window from the new lights on Sir Francis Drake. That is how bad the light pollution is here. It has severely affected my sleep. I have not yet sent you my letter with comments, because this is really impacting my ability to function. And I'm also wondering what kinds of studies have been done on light pollution. I don't feel like that's being taken into account as a health issue. People nowadays, they know that air pollution causes health issues, and So does light pollution. It disrupts the circadian rhythm, which in turn affects people's endocrine systems. And it sounds like right now the only concern is lighting on the road and no concern for the health of the residents along the road who are being impacted. And a lot of us live here because it's a suburban area and not a city. And currently the lighting here is so intense. It's brighter than many sections of San Francisco. And I would agree with the previous comment that it reminds me of an airport. And it's also just the number of poles that are up feels very intrusive.
Right, thank you. I think that this is really about trying to reduce that or eliminate and that spillover into people's backyards. It's about lighting the roadway appropriately and not people's homes. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve. I don't know if we'll get all the way there.
Thank you, because the spillover right now is really a problem. Because yes, one can use blackout shades, but then, you know, the way the circadian rhythm of the body works is that then when the sun comes up, it's easier to wake up in the morning. And then with blackout shades, it affects waking up in the morning. So it's either impossible to fall asleep or impossible to wake up. And so the spillover is horrendous at the moment. And then also just the poles are such an eyesore. I mean, I can see 6 poles out the kitchen window and 5 out the dining room window. Just and they're so tall and so thick. It's really visually also, and even just driving down Sir Francis Drake before, you know, you get off the busy freeway, you get onto Sir Francis Drake and enjoy. You're driving at sunset, you can enjoy the color of the clouds and the trees and whatnot. And now it's just like driving into an airport, just, you know, with the arms reach out so far and the poles are so tall and so thick. So I do hope that there will be a solution where we can reduce the numbers.
I don't mean to interrupt you on it, but I don't know if you caught the beginning of the presentation, but I mean,
yeah, I caught all of it.
All right, we're trying to address all of it, the aesthetics and everything. But all your comments are registered, and I hope that frankly, if you want to put something in writing, do send it to us, because all the comments matter. I'm gonna move on to Cheryl. Cheryl Prowell. Cheryl, you can unmute. Hi.
Hello. 1 second as I get my audio right.
We can hear you.
Okay. So I wanted to say 2 things. I think it's in zone 2, one of the areas where you were evaluating 2 options, either putting the poles up, the new decorative poles, or just retrofitting the Cobrahead poles. And I really want to express my strong preference for decorative poles. The poles themselves are, just like you heard from A's iPad, they're really unsightly. And my view of Mount Tam is now obstructed by one of these poles. And so I would really rather have a decorative pole if I have to have one that I can see from my house. I would also like to say that the upgrade the Drake, it's not going to really fix traffic problems overall unless we figure out how to reduce traffic. And we've heard, oh, there aren't many people that walk, but the upgrade the Drake has made it really difficult for people to cycle or walk. It's made it less attractive, less desirable to be along Sir Francis Drake. And I acknowledge there aren't a lot of pedestrians right now. I do walk in the evenings. Right now it doesn't get dark until late, but in the winter it gets dark fairly early. And if I go for a walk after work, I have to leave my house. A portion of my walk will be along Sir Francis Drake to get down to Hal Brown Park and along to the bike path. And so I would love it if it was safe and aesthetically pleasing to walk along Sir Francis Drake. And that's going to get more people out of their cars to do trips like taking kids to school or to do an errand by walking or biking rather than hopping in the car. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate those comments. Next up is, I'm trying to not go do second bites yet. Let's see, is Kevin's iPhone, is that a different Kevin than Kevin? Kevin's iPhone, you're up.
I'm sorry, I'm unmuting. Can you hear me
Yes,
now?
we can hear you. Hi, Kevin. I didn't know it was you.
Yeah, no, it was me. I'm jumping between meetings, so I'm trying to do this on the phone. So I apologize. And I apologize if I missed a couple of aspects of the meeting. This is Kevin Haroff. And just for reference, I live at 40 La Cuesta Drive. And again, I want to thank the county for having this meeting. I think it's important for us to all have an opportunity to have the discussions that we're having tonight. And I have to say that most, if not all, of the comments that we've heard from the community resonate with me greatly. I particularly appreciate those who have characterized the lighting fixtures along Sir Francis Drake out in front of Bon Air as having the character of the entrance of an airport. When I first saw those things go up, that was exactly my reaction as well. So I have, I guess, a process question, really, because I don't want to repeat what people have otherwise said tonight. My understanding is that the lighting issues, and this includes both the illumination issues as well as the traffic lighting structures, those were excluded from the scope of the environmental impact report that was prepared for this Francis Drake project initially. And I guess I know there's been some explanation about why that may have happened, but I'd like to hear maybe folks provide an explanation for why it did happen. I think a lot of the issues that people are addressing tonight could have been addressed in the context of an environmental impact report right at the outset, and we wouldn't be where we are today. And again, I'll be appreciative of the answer to that, but regardless of what the answer is, the question that I have is, would the county be willing and prepared to put together a supplemental environmental impact report addressing the lighting issues before going forward with the rest of the project? And with that, I'll sit down. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm not sure, Philip?
Eric?
Eric, I'm not sure who's best to answer this question, the questions regarding the EIR process.
Yeah, the street lighting conversation didn't enter the project team's scope until after the EIR was certified. And we worked with our environmental compliance team and our legal team and made the decision that it did not reach the point where we needed to modify the EIR document. And we submitted the documents consistent with CEQA, and we move forward with the lighting design and installation. That's the answer.
Yeah, and I think, Kevin, what I'd say is without knowing what it would take to do a supplemental EIR and or where the bar is for triggering something like that, I would not even begin to commit. You know, I can look for I can get an answer in terms of what that it would actually take. I don't think that is necessarily a supplemental EIR is going to help us actually modify this project to make it what we need it to be and want it to be as a community, and then as folks in traffic and engineering in terms of trying to create a safe roadway. So that's where this attention is being focused, but I will follow up with you in terms of what exactly it would take to go through and do a supplemental EIR and how helpful that actually might be.
And I would appreciate that. And I didn't really anticipate that you'd be providing any commitment tonight with regard to that issue. Mostly my comment is a placeholder. I do think that this conversation we're having tonight could have been avoided had the lighting issue been tackled earlier on in the context of the environmental impact report. And as I said, I want to have a placeholder for purposes of the record that the issue has been raised. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin.
Hey, Katie, if I might make a comment really quick to Kevin. And one of the things, had this been looked at as part of the environmental process, we would probably have come to where we're hopefully going to be, which is what is the minimum amount of light that we need to meet lighting standards for a roadway and not over illuminate the area and have that light pollution in places where we don't want it. We do have standards for design. And while I was sitting here on my phone, I found at least 5 attorneys willing to sue agencies who don't have adequate road lighting. If you get in an accident, just call them up. So we have to be very careful when we design roads that we are following standards, but we don't need to have runway lights. We don't need to have things bright as day all of the time. And then one final thing in terms of the consistency of lighting, our eyes as we age, and aging means 50 years old. As we age, the iris of our eye doesn't open and close as quickly at all, which is why you probably notice if high beams come at you as you get older, you don't recover as quickly. It's the same thing. If you, as a 60-year-old driver, come out of a lit area into a dark area, it's like putting sunglasses on a 25-year-old and setting them out to drive at night. And by the time you're 50 years old, you might have half the light entering your eye that a 30-year-old does. So these are things that we also have to think about. So just food for thought. Thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, appreciate that, Rosemary. And just to remind folks, Rosemary is the director of DPW at the county. And then I did reference this in our sort of comments early on. We really heard from a lot of residents who use the corridor who are older. They were asking for better lighting, make it easier to see. And I think it was a real driver in us looking at the lighting, one of the factors. But appreciate those comments. And it's not only about getting to that minimum amount of lighting that's needed and avoid the spillover, but also to have that infrastructure, be as aesthetically pleasing as is possible and feasible. So next up, and I've got 7 people with their hands raised. So I think we're doing pretty well, but we are at 7 o'clock. So I'll try to keep my remarks shorter and ask everyone else to be succinct as well. So Caitlin, Caitlin and Tony, you're coming up. You're third. So Caitlin, you can unmute.
Yes, hi, thanks, Katie. Just really quickly, I did notice along the very first portion of the zones, I guess it's zone 1. I understand it's only 3 lanes wide, but there the original light poles were offset as you work your way down the street, and they're located on not in the center, but on the sides of the roads. I'm just curious if any studies happened as far as using that same strategy along the rest of the length of Sir Francis Drake. And I understand that probably would have helped eliminate some of the light pollution that's happening behind them going into the homes, things like that. I understand that it's probably not really going to be a feasible solution since we have already placed the light poles in the center and put the foundations down, and we're trying to eliminate new foundations and new poles. But I was just curious if that was part of our studies or if that's something that can be considered moving forward.
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. Great question. Philip?
Typically, this is more for Jeff, but typically the distribution of the fixtures only has a reach that extends so far. So as you said, there's lighting fixtures that are feasible, and what Jeff and his team have looked at is what's the most feasible for throughout the whole corridor. And the poles that are installed in the median, there's a lot located between College and Ash, a lot of those double Cobraheads, and there's those same poles over at East Sir Francis Drake. And so what was placed there was kind of an infill, and that's how we got where we are now. And we're trying to reduce the light disturbance with these proposed changes.
Okay, thanks, Caitlin, for being here tonight. Steve O'Shea. Steve, are you there? You can
Yes, I am. I'm trying to leave the mobile meeting and just join the web here. Thank you so much, Katie. First a comment, then an invitation, and then a question, and I'll try not to be duplicative, so I'll move quickly. One, we do appreciate that the county is pursuing a resolution to the lighting situation as well as live public comment. We do appreciate that. So much of the focus has been on light trespass with modeling from above as to where the light extends off the roadway. It's incredibly important. The amount of trespass has a lot to do with pole height. So to that point, for many residents, you heard from Mohsen and Cheryl and A's iPad, the many residents along the corridor, it's the physical structures themselves which are equally troubling. So, I personally have 3 of these within view of my home in out of various windows. So as such, I'd like to personally invite you, Supervisor Rice, to visit some of the homes of your constituents along the corridor, particularly in Zone 2. Zone 2 is an area where, it is not settled as to what the resolution will be, whether or not they will be the shorter poles or retain the higher poles. And now the COVID restrictions have been relaxed and we're at 90% vaccination within Marin County. I know that we would welcome you in our homes as your constituents to see how egregious these light poles are in terms of where they are and how they disrupt views of Mount Tam and what we pay money for property taxes for. So that's my invitation to you. It doesn't need to be a big deal. It doesn't need to be a cause celeb. Just we would love to show you what we see as residents with these light poles. My question actually has to do with the budget. I know we talked about carving this out. Is this budget to resolve the lighting issues secured, and will it not be allocated to any other pressing resource or needs while we are looking for a resolution? Is this a set aside budget to fund the resolution of the lighting issues? Thank you for your time.
Great questions. And I'll turn it over to Philip or Eric for the budget question. And I'd love to do, I do field trips. I can't wait to start doing field trips again. So I'll take you up on your invitation. We can arrange that.
Yeah, I'll field the budget question. What we're looking at towards funding this and what I mentioned earlier about waiting until the project is closer to completion or complete is because every project that goes into construction has a contingency associated with it. And we don't know how much of that is going to be left given all the various changes. Once that picture becomes more clear, then we can start looking at using those funds or allocating those funds towards some of the changes we're talking about. The other source of revenue for these changes will be the Marin County Streetlight Fund. And so that's why once we have a clearer picture about the remaining contingency, we can get with the staff that manages the budgets for the street lighting fund and talk about what opportunities are there. So to answer your question, neither the remaining contingency or the Marin County Street Lighting Fund is being committed to other pressing matters or other projects at this time. And so I guess the way to answer your question is, yes, we are going to hold all other projects until we resolve this issue.
Thank you, Eric. Next up is Tony Simon.
Hi. Hi, thank you very much. I also wanted to ask about the budgeting because Katie, I understood that you had said that if we have money, we'll be correcting things. And I'd like to know why for whatever the company is that Jeff works for, why we're even doing anything with them because they're the ones that made this mess. So why are we staying with them? And also I want to talk about, I live on the corner of Manor and Sir Francis.
You're muted, Tony.
Tony, you have to unmute. You muted your.
Sorry. I want to talk, I live on the corner of Manor and Sir Francis Drake. I'm one of the ones that has a million lights. My whole house is lit up. I don't have my beautiful view of Mount Tam, but I want to talk about the toothpicks also, the railing. Now, we all know that 2 little girls were killed at 4 Manor Road, which is opposite my house, a long time ago, okay? There was no railing. The railing was put up, there was a million dents in the railing. You saw how many things. So on my particular block, I did get the railing because it's close to the pedestrian overpass stairway. But they spent a fortune. I will bet you they spent $8,000 if they spent a penny to make the end of it so that it would compress if a car hits it, instead of bringing it slightly around to protect the light pole and the fire hydrant. Now, I need Philip to be aware we've already had 1 accident on my corner. I'm on the west corner, and we've already had 1 accident. The pavement and drain is completely smashed up. okay? Why they didn't just use the ordinary railing that they did on my block, I'm the only one. They stopped it way from the corner. The kids now on their bikes, you should see them. They are coming to me because now it's nice and straight. They don't even look. They just go right across the street. Before, the kids had to make a bend around the end of this railing and stop and then get across the street. But now the fire hydrant is not protected, the street pole is not protected, and you spend a fortune on this compressible. You'll see it's got yellow and black diagonal tape on it, and it compresses, and it's filled with junk. So I don't even know if it's going to really work if a car hits it. Right now, I've seen a cone, I've seen trash in there, I've seen all this crap in there, so it probably doesn't even work, but you've spent a fortune on it. All you had to do was extend the little railing slightly around to protect the fire hydrant and the corner. So Lady Diana was killed because the car hit a column in the underpass. And I thought in the United States, we had a rule when there's columns, you have to have a rail. And that's why, yes, the rail was banged up, but cars skid along there. Now you've got posts, that's going to hurt the drivers more. It's going to push them back. You guys have wasted so much. I can't imagine there'll be any money left over to correct the lights, but thank you very much, Katie. I'm finished.
No, you're welcome, and appreciate your comment and perspective. And I think Eric's going to speak to what you raised.
And I want to know if Philip and Eric are aware there's already been one accident at my corner.
Yes, we're aware. We're aware, and we're also aware of the bikes and how they're straightened out and how the kids, particularly the middle schoolers going to Kent Middle School at 8:45 are going too fast. So we're well aware of that. We're working on solutions for that.
Real quick, Philip, I want to address the most important part of your comment in that Fair and Piers is not the company that designed the original project. And so their company does not deserve what you just said about them. We brought them in as lighting specialists to help us get through this. And so I just wanted to set that record straight.
And then just to follow up on the comment about the kids and the sidewalk curve, and we're also working with Safe Routes to Schools with the Kentfield School District folks and Basich on managing that area.
But they could have saved so much money.
Doing the best we can. Thank you so much, Tony. Okay, let's see. Helena, have you gone yet, Helena? I can't remember now.
I did go, so you can skip
okay.
over me if you want. Yeah.
Okay. Marvin. Good evening, Marvin.
Oh, Katie, I did want to ask another question though, but I can go with
you can stay in line, but I'm gonna let Marvin.
I'll go in the back of the line. Okay, thank you.
Marvin, you look unmuted, but we can't hear you. Where did he go? Try to unmute again. You don't look like you're muted. Can you talk? Yeah, you've got something turned off. You've got something wrong. While you try to fix that, Marvin, I'm going to go to Daria. Daria?
It might be me. Is that me by chance?
Yes, that is
Hello?
you.
Oh, no, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I guess not.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. I just can't see myself. Okay. This is George Baronoff, actually. Thank you for taking my call. And Katie, thank you so much for having this meeting. I think it's important to have the community have a chance to speak about this entire project. Most of my comments really have to do with the intersections rather than the lighting, but I would like to point out one thing. Generally speaking, cars coming off of the freeway come from an area that has very low lighting to a very area of high house. And then they're going to go off and back into the neighborhood, which has, again, low lighting, which brings up this issue about changing light levels. Maybe the answer really is to reduce the light levels, even though they may not be to the standards necessary by today. And I don't know what those are. I don't know whether you have to abide by those or not, but this is really a rural area. It's not really an urban area. And maybe we shouldn't have to comply with those, or we can get an exception to that.
Thank you, George. Philip or Or
Okay,
Rosemary, did
the
you
other
want?
topics I would like to discuss, which may or may not be on this, on the agenda tonight, because I'm not sure, I thought it was on all items, but it has to do with the timing of the lighting. I thought we were getting a very sophisticated system, which does not seem to be working. And I'll leave it at that at this point, and we can have the conversation later or whatever you.
You know what, actually, I think, I mean, we've got more
Thank
folks.
you.
Yeah, thank you, George. So I think we can, might as well address the intersection lighting now. That's fine. We've got a few more hands up, but we'll just take questions whether they're around lighting or the general project. So Philip, you want to talk about the way the intersection timing, the intersection lights and timing are working and or will work in the future?
Yeah, as I said earlier, we're working on making improvements to the signal coordination and timing. So we had detection at the intersection, which is when the controller sees the cars and whether there's a queue or not. That detection hasn't been in place. So we haven't even had a chance to really bring everything up to speed and work on a lot of that coordination. So there's still a lot of work for us to do behind the scenes in the cabinets with the programming. Just now that everything is up and running. And I said also that at Wolf Grade, we made changes even yesterday. We had a phasing change at Laurel Grove today, or at La Cuesta rather, excuse me, today. So we're making changes there. Did you also want me to address, or Jeff, do you want to address coming off the freeway? And
just
coming to an intersection, or yeah.
Yeah, at a high level, it's a function of a lot of different factors, but the amount of time you're at, and the volume of those roadways. So it's not the whole amount of your trip; it's the corridors themselves. But we're following the best practices of the national standard as we go through this. So.
And I think as we turn off of Sir Francis Drake onto the neighborhood streets, they're also slower. We're traveling more slowly, and anyway, but still a good question. Let's see. Catherine Wong, you haven't had it turn yet. Catherine, good evening. You can unmute.
Hi there, Katie. So since you said you wanted to open it up to the whole project, there's a couple of things. The first thing is if you're going to do that thing with the lights, you might as well update the whole corridor. These fences here between Sir Francis Drake and our properties are totally deficient now that you have all this stuff going on and you're saying the traffic is multiple. I mean, if you're going to go full urban on this area, which I don't agree with, you need to put like a cement barrier here so that the residents are protected from all of this stuff that's being kicked up from the street. You know, I mean, these fences are totally inadequate. Okay, regarding this Update the Drake project, I wrote both you and Upgrade the Drake, and nobody responded to me regarding this work going out on Sir Francis Drake. I was so upset when they were jackhammering our street and all of this dust and junk is coming into my house. You know, they're not doing any water, they're not doing anything to tamp down this dust, which is absolutely toxic. If you read anything about asphalt dust, we have kids living around here. There's lead in this asphalt dust, and it's going to affect our kids. And nothing was done. Nothing was done to mitigate this. So I went out here to one of these guys sitting in a truck on the first night, and he said, oh, this is going to go, you know, you got an email. This is going on from the 20th to July 2nd. And then he handed me a business card for Upgrade the Drake. So I wrote Upgrade the Drake. I told them my concerns, and they said, oh, we heard you talk to one of our inspectors who was on the job, and he made everything right. So I wrote them back and I said, no, he did nothing. He didn't even identify himself. So honestly, this has just been, I have dust all over my house. It's all over the car. It's all over my yard. I don't know, it just was not handled properly. I mean, I would think that you would have water, you would have something to keep the dust to a minimum. but they have trucks going by with the dust spilling into these other trucks, and it's coming all, you could see it, it's all over. And to have no response to your constituents is really, I mean, you've had 3 days now to respond to me, and Drake has had 3 days to respond to me, and I've had nothing.
Yeah,
Really
Catherine,
disappointed with this effort here.
I'm very sorry to have missed your email. We have been trying to catch them all, and if I didn't respond, it was a miss. We've been trying to catch them all, and I know what you've been going through, and your neighbors has been incredibly intense and disruptive, and the dust on top of it is just adds insult to injury. I don't know that there has been a way around it, but I guess I'll pass off to Philip to talk about. There's not that much work left, but maybe you can speak to whatever dust control measures were in place or not in place.
Yeah, for dust control, we have had two street sweepers. We've had a vacuum truck and a water truck for dust suppression the whole time. I will say we did start on what was surprisingly one of the windiest days that we've had all year. In 2021 was the first day we started grinding. And so there was more dust than there usually would have been. And this kind of work is difficult. It's often, there is dust when the trucks are loaded. I would be happy though, Catherine, if you provided me your address or emailed me to come by your house and look at what you've been dealing with and have a look firsthand. So again, I apologize to everyone for the inconvenience, and I appreciate your patience as we really are reaching the end of the work and the major disturbing activities.
What about upgrading the fencing along between our properties? Because if the traffic has increased as much as you say, these little fences, these little wood fences are totally inadequate. And they took I'm between El Portal and Alicio, they took out all the vegetation and none has been put back. I mean, we see cars going by literally every day.
So Philip, I don't know if that's more of a question to take up with the CSA 16 or 17, but Catherine, it's registered, and we will look for your email and we'll get back to you on that. And again, I apologize for not responding to whatever email you sent that I missed.
There were two.
Okay. Let's see, Mary Connolly. Mary?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Mary. Good evening.
Great. First of all, thank you for having a community meeting. It's pretty important that this happens. I'm having a little bit of PTSD from the Highway 101 Greenbrae interchange project from 2013, which any of you can Google to find out what the communities of Corte Madera and Larkspur and Green Bay experienced under the direction of Katie Rice. And it was soundly put to rest, because the community, when they found out about it, and that's a communication thing I will get to in a moment, were very surprised at what was being proposed, and that there was a lack of process evident. Anyway, but cogent to this point here, Phil, Ashley, Nancy, Jeff, I know that you guys are working as hard as you can. Phil, you're like under fire, and I'm like, please, can I dodge in more bullets? You're okay. You just, all of you are very much aware of the community input at this point in time, which leads me to a couple of statements. Number one, we're on Zoom. Anybody who cannot hear, who is hearing impaired, cannot listen to or engage in any of these processes. That comes from a recent enlightenment about disability. And if you want the community to really participate, you need to consider everybody. So I won't ask, well, I'm going to ask the question is, why don't we have a ASL interpreter on this? Which leads to a second question. All of us are English speakers. How will these proceedings be recorded into a different language? And there are many in Marin. I walk on the paths, I hear French, I hear German, I hear Spanish, I hear a lot of different languages. And I don't think that people will have the kind of access they need, for those who care. That's something to note, to proceedings like this. Another point is focusing on what people are saying. People are asking for evidence. They are asking for statistics. They are asking for diagrams. They are asking for those things to be put up beforehand. I mean, if I knew that you were going to do these like really cool decorative lights that were going to capture so many lumens and do that kind of stuff, I actually might not have attended. But I couldn't find anything on the website, which seems very light in terms of evidence and statistics. And that makes it hard to understand a project. I come from a scientific research base. That's how I kind of operate my life. And when I go to town of Corte Madera or Larkspur or whatever, that's what I see up there. I go, oh, where's the diagrams? Where's the plans? Oh yeah, that's not so bad. And I didn't see anything like this for this particular project, nor did I see stuff like that to replay my PTSD moment from 2013 with the Highway 101 Greenbrae interchange project until people actually demanded it. Which leads me to another thing. If you want the community to really be involved in input for these projects for which we are paying, your salaries, the project, the whole thing, you need to let us know earlier. Today at 12 o'clock, I got a notice about tonight's meeting at 5:30. Well, dang, what if I was doing something different? What if I had plans? What if I was cooking dinner, which is now delayed, so that I could attend this? So I get this thing from the email, and then I get this nice little thing. And Katie, please do not cut me off. Do not cut me off. Thank you. I didn't get a notice until 12 o'clock today. And I've been in communication with other people through Nextdoor. They're like, I didn't hear about this. It's like, okay. So somehow you're expecting us to go to the website and sign up and do all of these things, or that somebody sent us an email when in fact that doesn't happen. So note to the website person, and maybe the question is, when are you going to update the website to be in tune with notifying people of the kinds of things that you're proposing? Because a lot of this could have been done earlier, not just today, but months and months and months ago. All right.
Mary, there are a bunch of people that still have their hands up.
Yeah, there are, but I want all of these people to hear what I have to say, including you. There was an EIR option, and I'm wondering why that wasn't required for the lighting. Light pollution is real. I'm thinking, oh my God, who was it? A's iPad has a real kind of issue with this. You need to pay attention to that. And if you haven't done that, I'm sure that many of these participants will send you links to what blue light does to people who have seasonal affective disorder and more, or macular degeneration, or whatever. This is really important. Last question, and actually I will end this with my last question, is who is funding this? Is this a project for which a grant and a grant was received that has a deadline spend date? I have seen that happen project time over and over and over again. Corte Madera, Larkspur, Greenbrae. I don't live in Greenbrae. I live somewhere else, but I see this happening over and over again. It's like, oh yeah, we got this really cool grant. We can install all these wonderful lights and do these things. And then nobody asks the community. The community is speaking out. And it may be a day late and a dollar short right now, but the community is speaking loud. And people like Phil, Ashley, Nancy, Jeff, your community members, Dan Carner, A's iPad, Kevin Haroff, who has endured other kinds of situations from other cities and municipalities, Noreen. We kind of know,
Mary,
we do. I'm done.
Can you finish up?
Yep, I can. But can you do your job?
Yes.
Can you do your job?
I think what I'd really like to do is have Eric Philip answer your last question first with regards to the funding for this project, where the funding comes from, and then I'll speak to the communication pieces.
All right. Yeah, so the funding comes from several sources, but just to speak to the street lighting specifically, it's funded by the Marin County Streetlight Fund. It's also funded a portion by the County General Fund, Road and Bridge Program. And there's also a portion of TAM Measure A sales tax funds that funded the entire project that's paying for some of the soft costs as well. So those would be the different funding sources contributing. And no, there is no spend by date on any of these funds.
Thank you. And then I really appreciate, Mary, actually, I really appreciate the comments around this medium and trying to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. Unfortunately, I don't have the Zoom account that allows for that interpretation. There's many Zooms being hosted by the county, by different staff members, by supervisors. We don't all have that capacity yet. It is something that we're looking into to ensure that there's interpretation, maybe not an ASL interpreter, but at least the interpretation function, and really doing the best we can. And when we get back to regular in-person public meetings, we're going to continue to have folks being able to participate in our public meetings virtually. So it's really important, and I'm glad you raised that. I will have Nancy send you a link to the website, and she can find the pages for you that have more of the documents that show the detailing of what we're talking about and the presentation.
Katie, I have a link to the website.
Okay. So I didn't interrupt you, please, Mary. So let me finish. And then I'm not sure why you didn't get any of the other notices with regards to this meeting. I don't know how many were sent out over time, both to the email distribution list, the folks that have signed up to the website, also through social media. We're really trying to do our best. I know we can always do better, but really trying to make sure that folks do know when these meetings are being held and have the ability to participate and discuss. And frankly, that's been a goal and objective of this entire project right from the get-go, to work with the community as much as possible and provide as many opportunities for input and ideas. And I'm proud of the work we've done and the way we've handled it. It doesn't mean we haven't fallen down a couple times, but I just wanted to make sure to say that. And I thank you, Nancy, and the project team for your efforts on communication. If not perfect, they certainly have been really robust. So Mary, just a second. It is 7:30, it's past 7:30, 7:38. So I'm happy to stay on the Zoom, but I do want to let staff go, and we can hold on to any questions that are technical that need responses and get answers from them back to you at a later date. But I do want to be respectful of the long days that you guys have already put in. So Eric and Philip and whoever else is here, and Jeff, I want to give you permission.
May I say one thing?
Actually, Mary, I'm gonna let my staff respond to see what they want to do. And then I want to let the other people who have their hands up and have been waiting patiently, give them a chance.
Good. Thank you for listening.
I will say, as in terms of accessibility, there is
just 1 second. Eric, can you go on?
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to add that we will be putting the presentation material onto the website. We can't get it on there tonight, but we will have it on there tomorrow by the end of the day. And so you can check the Upgrade the Drake website for all the presentation material.
Thank you. All right, you're next.
I was going to say, to the accessibility point, there is an option in settings for closed captioning, so that if someone has trouble hearing, they are able to get a transcript of the Zoom meeting in its entirety, as well as to read captioning in real time.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add that. And then my question that I wanted to follow up with was, Katie, do you know if there's an option to turn off these new streetlights while your team tries to figure out how to deal with the situation? And then I'm also wondering Oh, in terms of the traffic signals, they have these yellow reflectors around the perimeters, which seem to me to be rather an eyesore. And I actually find that my eye is more drawn to the reflective yellow rim than to the actual street light. And obviously the light is what matters the most. So I'm wondering if it's possible to remove those yellow reflective rims. And then I also noticed that a lot of streets currently have temporary signs up that say no right turn on red. I'm wondering if that is a temporary situation or if the plan is for that to be permanent, because I've noticed it seems to be making traffic worse. There have definitely been many times where I have stayed stopped at a red light when I could have safely driven, and there have been many cars behind me. So I know traffic is frequently an issue on Sir Francis Drake, and in my experience thus far, the no right turn on red seems to be compounding the issue.
Those are good questions. I'm glad that Eric and/or Philip stayed with us to answer them. So could you, Eric or Philip, I don't know who wants to take it if you're here.
Went to our consultants today to talk more about the no right on red, to provide a response to those that are asking that question. So that's another thing that we should be seeing on the frequently asked questions on the website appearing soon.
What about, and then turning off the lights during this period when we're designing whatever the upgrade is going to be?
Well, I know, Wendy, that you're at the corner of Manor, near where Motion is at Wolf Grade, and most of the lights there are intersection lights at Wolf Grade. There is a new light there as you approach Wolf Grade intersection, which is kind of the transition. But in general, the lights in Greenbrae, which were new when we turned them on in February, they were very bright. And so those lights and the lights across from Marin Catholic that were also the majority of the new poles and the new lights that really weren't there, and those areas hadn't been lit previously. Those lights were turned off until we could really evaluate this, until we could model this more sufficiently. The light trespass was recognized to be not as we intended, and so we're working to make it right.
We have non-intersection lights that are still on. There's definitely one right in front of what's the name of that preschool there, right by the.
I know where you live. We can maybe talk tomorrow, Wendy, if you'd like as well.
Okay, thanks. And about the reflective tape on the signals, traffic lights. Is it possible to take that off, or is that permanent, or?
The reflective tape around the signal heads it's an industry standard trend that's moving that way. You'll notice all the traffic signals around Marin and everywhere else are moving towards the yellow borders. And so that was intentional and to stay.
Yeah, I've been noticing those too as well, Wendy, and they are what's going up anywhere we're seeing new signals. I've seen them in San Rafael and all the work that's doing there. It seems to, and there was probably, I would imagine, studies done that actually, while it may not work for you, it helps draw people's eye to where the signal lights are. Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
that's good to know.
Yeah. Wendy, I'm going to go on to the next person. Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Helena.
Yeah, thank you for circling back to me. I was just sitting down to dinner with my kids when you called on me, so I felt very rushed. Something that occurred to me now is I appreciated your comment about older residents requesting better lighting due to eyesight. And I am somebody who has to wear glasses at night when I drive. And I think for the people who live in this neighborhood, and maybe older residents who live in this neighborhood, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm wondering if there's any evidence that for commuters and people who are using this as a throughway, if actually having more intense lighting encourages people to drive faster. Like I personally feel like when I enter a well-lit area, like I probably drive faster without even realizing it. So I'm wondering if there's any evidence that the lighting making the roads look like a freeway actually encourages people to drive faster. And then my second question would be, I appreciate that safety is the main issue here. And I cross Sir Francis Drake with my 2 small children almost on a daily basis to go to Bon Air. And I've had some really harrowing experiences crossing the street with my children. I had a truck go through a red light 3 to 5 seconds after the light had turned red and nearly hit me and my 2 kids. It was terrifying. But all of these instances in which I've had terrifying experiences have been during the daytime. And so I'm wondering, are there safety issues that could be addressed that are related to just driving in general on Sir Francis Drake that could mitigate the need for just focusing on lighting? Like, are there other things that could be done to address the safety at all hours of the day that would make people feel like, okay, we've made this road safer, and now we don't just need to think about the lighting, if that makes sense?
So the road is posted, the posted speed limit is 35 or 40 throughout most of the corridor, and it slows down when you get closer to Ross. At night, we've had a number of experiences like what you're describing, where people are driving very fast at night, and without citing a study or knowing those kind of details, when people see the open road in front of them and it's a nice wide road at night, they go very fast. And it's not everyone, but there's a tendency at night when the road is clear to go very fast. And so one of the solutions that we have is really just more enforcement, and our contractor has asked for more enforcement from the CHP. And at El Portal, when people come down the hill, when they come down the hill at Marin Catholic towards Wolfgrade, when they come around the corner at Ash, where we put in the new Hawk signal, those are all locations where we look at the accident data, we look at the number of rear end collisions, we put in the Hawk signal, and we specifically request enforcement. And so if there's a particular spot that you're seeing that we should ask for more enforcement from CHP to be writing tickets, we would definitely listen to that and make that request on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's crossing at La Cuesta. And so that's where I've seen people run red lights. And then we had that awful accident in the past year where that car went into the Caldwell Bank. And that was pretty terrible at that intersection. But with regards to my first question about lighting, I mean, you said an open road makes people drive faster. Would an open, bright road make people drive faster as well? Is there evidence that points to that?
I can't answer that question. I don't know if Jeff can, but we have heard that same comment from a number of other people that we've noted.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Helena. Let's see. I've got Terry, Bettina, and Mosen. And if I'm going to ask, is there anyone who has not asked a question yet or made a comment that would like to now before I go to these folks?
I see Ian raising his
Oh, I'm
hand
sorry, that's
manually.
right.
Yeah.
Ian had his hand up like this.
Yes,
I'm sorry, Ian.
the ability to raise a hand has been disabled. So one thing to an earlier individual's comment, and I don't want to be negative towards them, the ability to have captions is a feature of Zoom, and that is not enabled in this meeting. So people cannot get captions in this meeting.
Right. Noted.
I really appreciate the comments about speed. I would like to see a study of the accidents on Sir Francis Drake and the correlation to speed. The stoplight at Bon Air Road gets treated like a start light at a drag strip. If you live on this road, you hear the Dodge Chargers and the Mustangs just drag racing from that intersection. So speed is a major, major, major problem on Sir Francis Drake. So to a comment that I don't think was addressed earlier, and this will go to kind of the project in general, this project has made Sir Francis Drake more hostile and less safe for pedestrians. There are bike loops that have been removed, and they don't appear to be taken back. They don't appear to be being replaced. The protective barrier, the engineered protective barrier, was replaced with a decorative barrier that has already been damaged and knocked over. The little wood 4x4s are not going to stop a car. A car will just simply go past that, and they're not repairable. You know, the continuous cable through that is going to make it very expensive to continue to repair this on a regular basis. In particular, the section between Manor and Wolf Grade Rosie Path and Wolf Grade has become considerably more hostile towards cyclists. The bridge has been squeezed, and there is less shoulder area for cyclists to not use the sidewalk. This is redesigned to force cyclists onto the sidewalk, which is a less safe situation. And earlier I heard Patrick blaming cyclists for going too fast, and that is the problem. I take offense to that. Cyclists in general are more law-abiding than motorists. And, you know, every other location that's actually solving traffic issues is increasing pedestrian, bike access, and public transit options. The personal automobile will never solve traffic issues.
Thank you, Ian. No know if there was a question in there or if someone wants to speak to the barrier, but all your comments completely noted. Heard. Sorry, I'm sorry about the hand raise function. I'm not sure what's happening. Okay. Kristen McDevitt. Kristen?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I wanted to ask like a very specific question. Will you be doing a study that shows the efficacy of lights or not? I mean, I've heard it suggested, and I just wanted to hear like a yes or no. And the second question is, do you know when your next meeting like this will be?
I don't know when my next meeting like this will be. I actually expect to be probably trying to do a more general community meeting later on at the end of summer, and probably like I usually actually in real life somewhere. And I'm sure we would be addressing this project, but we'll be communicating out about this project no matter what in the interim as and as Phil and Philip and Eric mentioned, meeting with the CAC and trying to nail down, you know, final design. And I'm going to leave it up to be meeting with the team after this meeting to hear, you know, their thoughts on sort of next steps, and we'll communicate back out to all of you. And then the question with what was the other one? Oh, the efficacy of the lights. A study with regards to the efficacy of the lights. I don't know if Eric or Philip, if there's anything on the website we can point to, or.
I think the question was a study, if whether or not we're going to conduct a study to see if street lighting increases speed along a roadway. Is that correct, Kristen?
Correct.
We can look around and see if similar studies have been done by either other agencies or other thesis type papers, but I don't think that we have the resources to conduct a study with the small sample size that we have in our network.
Okay. The other thing is, I heard someone mention something about 5 attorneys you guys have consulted with. My husband's a personal injury attorney, and so I can't speak for him, but I'd just be interested to hear like who they were and what exactly they stated. I do also just want to throw out a little tiny thing that I'm at my parents in Los Altos right now, and when I go for runs in the hills, there are kind of these toothpick fences around that do nothing. Like it would pretty much injure the runner more than anything. And they have signs posted. Maybe it's because it's not incorporated, or it is incorporated, but they have signs posted that these fences are purely for design. They're not at all for keeping anyone safe. And so I'm just wondering, if there is an accident, who gets sued? Is it like the taxpayers or you guys? And you don't have to, I just wanted to throw it out there.
And actually, I would really like it if Philip or you, Eric, could speak to the design of that the fence, the railing, in terms of replacing the guardrail that was there before, and how that is supposed to work. I think that's important for folks.
Yeah, it's come up a couple times now. So the post and cable fence that was installed is not intended as a vehicular barrier. It is an improvement for pedestrian fall protection from someone in the sidewalk into the road.
Blame the non-motor user.
I'm sorry.
Eric, go ahead.
It has actually increased safety for the non-motor users. The guardrail that was there before had posts that stuck out every 12.5 feet that actually were tripping hazards, or a bicycle pedal could hit them, and it was unsafe or less safe than what's installed now for the non-motor users. And so what we did is we made a more linear barrier and increased the height to protect the fall protection for the non-motor users into the roadway. The reason that we made this decision during design is because Sir Francis Drake is a straight road, and it does not warrant the installation of a vehicular barrier guardrail. One of the reasons that the inline crash system was put in at Manor Road, the previous resident made a comment about the inline guardrail. That's because the guardrail that was there before that curved around the corner to, as you put it, protect the fire hydrant, those guardrails are actually designed to curl backwards when they're hit. And so the way that it was installed previously, if it were to be hit by a car, it would actually curl backwards into the sidewalk and hit anyone in the sidewalk, as well as go into the fence. That's how those systems are designed. So what was put into place is something that's designed to, when it gets hit, it crumples and does not bend either into the roadway or into the sidewalk. So it's actually a safety improvement for the non-motor users and the motor users. And so all the decisions were made with all of those different modes of transportation in mind.
And Jessica, I see you shaking your head no. I'll go ahead and send you a video of what Eric's talking about on the guardrail and the way that they're designed to help explain that a little better. I'll follow up with you though, and let's go to somebody else if we could.
And so actually, so what we've got, I think Carrie is the only person, I don't think you've had a chance yet to ask a question. There's a few more hands up, but they're from folks who've already asked. I'm going to close this off at 8 o'clock, but I wanted to give Carrie a chance since you haven't had a chance yet.
Hi, yeah, hi. Hey, everyone. It's Kari, and I live on Bertano Way, so right on Sir Francis Drake. I think this has been a great meeting. It's gone on a long time, and I'm sitting here with all my notes, kind of summarizing the meeting and kind of thinking about it as far as what's the real takeaway here. So Jeff's team presented this idea of the Cobraheads going away, which is great. And then he mentioned lowering the poles by 8 feet or so. So what does that bring the poles to? So down to, say, 20 feet? Because I know that truck clearance is 15 feet, correct?
25 feet or less.
So my questions are kind of like, what do we take away from this meeting? I think it's been good. And I think, Katie, you've heard a lot of us. I have the same concerns as a lot of people that have spoke. So I don't want to repeat all of that. But I do kind of want to walk away from this meeting knowing that it was a good 2-hour time investment for all of us.
Right. Okay. Appreciate that. Philip, can you answer about the height of the poles first, what the reduction is that we were looking at and Jeff was showing in terms of those other pole designs?
Yeah, so the existing poles are, the fixture on the pole is 34 to 35 feet. And we're looking at dropping the pole height or the fixture height down to 25 feet or below. So that 25 feet would be measured from the fixture down to the pavement surface that it's illuminating to try to light the roadway. So it would be a height reduction of at least 8 feet.
So is that the top of the fixture, 25 feet?
No, that's the bottom of the fixture where the illuminance is coming down. Jeff, if you want to present anything on that, and you're still on the line.
Yeah, I'm still here. The only thing, no, it's fine. The height of the pole of the one that we showed is about 27 feet above. So but that's all something that can be trimmed down. But that 25 feet that Philip was saying is the bottom of the fixture to the top of the roadway.
So Personally, I'd like to see that pole come down as low as possible, because right now it's blocking our view of Mount Tam and it's towering over our backyard. And I don't want to see that pole. So Catherine's idea of a taller fence might be a possibility. I don't think that CSA 16 has the funds for that, but it's too tall. It's where it's at now. I thought it was at 30 feet, but now you're telling me it's 36. So I don't see 25 feet being really a compromise, or considering that a lower pole. So maybe if you could take a look at that as making it as low as possible, would be great. Thank you.
So I think in terms of summarizing sort of the high level takeaways, but I think we'll probably go back, the team will go back and look at the notes and think about, the goal is to figure out, I think there's consensus. If you're going to have poles up and lighting fixtures, to be able to reduce the pole height as much as possible, and to be able to control the lighting as possible in order to provide the minimum amount of light necessary to achieve whatever that safety lighting goal is. I think that's what we're hearing. I think there's probably a lot of disagreement, and I think the team's going to look really hard at what amount of lighting is actually necessary, because that will also determine how many poles there are, right? And if we're trying to reduce that height. I think that the other takeaway, there was a few comments. I think there was some nodding that if you're going to have poles at all, folks like the pole design that is, that more, sort of what I don't remember how they describe it. Not the Cobra arms, but the pole design that was a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. They were green. They look more like the stuff we see in Larkspur and along roadways there. And then, I'm hearing folks just questioning the need to do anything. And I think that, I want the team to be able to, in the end, cite, why the decisions are being made for however much lighting is there. So there's some work to do there. We have to find out, we do have to pay for whatever changes are made, however many poles are replaced, or if there are any added, there is a cost associated with that. I think the fixtures are less of a financial hit, but it's really replacing any poles or adding new poles that's going to add significant cost, and we have to know what that is with ultimately what the design is, and figure out if we can fund it. I have got my fingers crossed, and I'm feeling hopeful given the way this project has gone so far. We will still have contingency monies left over, and if we can't fund all the improvements that with whatever's left over, we could try to do something potentially in phases if there is a determination to do more than what we have the funding to do. In the end, I don't think everybody is going to be pleased. I think it's going to be hard to please everyone, but I do think that there's some consensus around whatever is there, what does it look like, and how much light does it shine, which is less rather than more. And then we'll keep up with the communication and try to keep everyone in touch. The CAC will be meeting some more, but it's all good feedback. I mean, this is hard. This isn't easy. Anytime there's a change of any kind, especially with lighting or any structures, these are people's homes in your backyards, and I understand that it's hard to make improvements like this that don't feel like a major change. And I am concerned with the fact that we've had the lights off down those medians for so long that even if they are to go back on and are way less impactful than what was there before, it's still going to feel like a lot. And then lastly, I don't want to forget about the intersection lighting, and the team will be working on that intersection lighting and with neighbors on back shields and whatever can be done. And they've just had their hands full up until that will not be forgotten. So I think with that, unless Eric or Philip, you have any